how people they become a little bit more engaged, and then they also want to give back a little bit.
All right, today in the spotlight, we are joined by Wingate Head Triathlon Coach Nick Radkewich. Welcome to the spotlight, Coach.
Thanks, Brian. It's just great to be here, and great to just have a nice chat.
It's been fun to watch how you've developed your program and had the success that you've had. And you've had some very unique, and I think some experiences that would be interesting to a lot of people to hear about from your perspective, namely your first year, just 2 years ago at Wingate. You went out and had some great team success at the national level, and you also have had some great individual successes at the national level. So let's start with that. Give us a quick history of triathlon at Wingate University.
Yeah, I mean, I started in October 1st of 2020. Actually, that's when I got hired. Had my first recruiting call that first day in the office. NCAA rules, you're allowed to start calling from the office. So started then, and the focus was really about finding where Wingate kind of fit into the college triathlon scene. What did we have to offer student athletes? What kind of students would be interested in the majors, the minors, things like that. And really that beginning first couple of weeks was really about trying to find our story, how I was going to present it, how I was going to talk to recruits. And fortunately, just had some good success early on, starting to build the program. And then moved on to really trying to focus and target some student athletes that we're going to have an impact on launching the program, right? As you know, from starting a program, you have to get to that level where you can field a team. You got to have enough numbers to put somebody out there to finish enough races. So I kind of got that out of the way, and then became about really targeting some really talented student athletes. And year one, we were really fortunate in being able to get a few of those student athletes that had a big impact. And like I said, we were able to win a national championship year one with Finja Shirl from Germany, and that was a lengthy recruiting process, with her. And we ended up going against a D1 Power 5 cross country program that was going to let her do some club triathlon. That ended up to be our rival, I found out later on. And so there was that kind of finding our place, kind of finding our pitch, trying to get a team, and then having some opportunities to focus on some quality athletes. So that's how we started out. And I think that's kind of built from there as we were able to establish that team year one, have some success, as a team, finishing runner up as nationals, having a national champion. Things have been able to move a little bit easier, but certainly, as you know, growing a team, that adds some complexities that we've run into now in year two, where we went from 8 student athletes in year one to 15 in year two, and now there's team selections, and there's filling in for injuries, and there's accommodating coaches, and we also have the added I think benefit of having a men's program that goes in coordination with our women's NCAA program. So there's always balancing that as well. It's been a lot of fun. It's been challenging, and certainly it's been talking to coaches like yourself, or talking to Sunny at Queens, and really trying to figure out how we can move forward and move this sport forward as an NCAA sport.
Interesting. Yeah, your media training is showing through right there in that response. I think you answered about 5 of the questions I had written down for today. But you led some great insights there in terms of your approach to building out a roster. I know that it's been highly variable across the NCAA. We have over 40 programs now. We've had a few others that started, had different levels of success, some that contracted over the past few years. And something that you've done at Wingate that has allowed you to thrive very, very quickly, you got that roster together. And it sounds like your approach was to make sure you had that scoring roster and then grow from there. And that's interesting. So, talk about that, because I know that you had collegiate coaching positions prior to this. How did you kind of develop that approach to roster building?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting perspective as far as, with triathlon being a new sport, a lot of the coaches coming in have amazing triathlon coaching backgrounds. But we're collegiate coaches. So, I look at it as, my first job is recruiting. You have to have a team to coach. We see that often where we have a great coach, but, there's not a team there to field. So recruiting, athlete management, you talk about, psychology, mental health, talk about balancing national team requirements and collegiate requirements. So athlete management, and then you finally get to some coaching, and then you've got all this other stuff. So I was able to kind of learn some of that as a cross country and track and field coach at the NCAA level, and a lot of that was learning from the lacrosse coach. Lacrosse coaches, for me, have always been those dynamic recruiters. They're doing these big preview games, tournaments. They're talking to tons of athletes. They're bringing them in for visits. So getting to work with some coaches in other sports and really see how they do it really helped me from the recruiting perspective. I think my experience as a collegiate athlete at Notre Dame was really helpful. My core group of my recruiting class there, we became the recruiters for subsequent classes, and so that experience as a student athlete really carried over to me recruiting as a coach. And then again, just listening and learning from other coaches. There's no perfect answer to training. There's no perfect answer to recruiting. Everybody has to customize it to their institution. So I think I was able to do that, based on that experience, based on learning from some of my peers here at Wingate, how they recruit, where they've been successful. For me, the big challenge here was learning kind of the international student athlete game. That wasn't something that was available to me, at some of my previous institutions. And not every school works well with internationals. I was fortunate here. We've got a great international office. Some of our programs here also have had success recruiting internationally. So drawing on that and being able to, have some success recruiting internationals has been a big plus for our program. I think one of the things I'm most excited about next year, though, is kind of the spectrum of recruits we're bringing in this year. We've kind of got a baseline team. We've got I feel like a really strong roster. We've got some top end talent. We've got some developing talent, and then we've got some newbies coming in. First time triathletes. I'm not shying away from them. I think they add a lot to the program, and so I'm out there recruiting them as well. And I think next year will be our first reasonably sized class, 5 to 6 on the women's side, and we're going to fill that full spectrum of student athletes coming in. I think it helps build the culture, and certainly we're looking for strong academics. We're looking for a lot of other things other than triathlon, but I think for me as a coach and for us as a team, it's a lot of fun watching these different levels of experience come into the program.
You mentioned that you're already developing the men's club side. It sounds like maybe you're building a roster that could populate a women's club side. Is that part of your vision as well?
Yeah, I mean that's. I think for us, we're a Division II program, and as and maybe not everybody else out there, but we tend to be an enrollment-driven program. That's part of collegiate sports. That's just the reality of it. And so we expect to have 20 on the women's roster, 20 to 21 next fall, and certainly part of my challenge as a coach is creating opportunities for them to compete, participate. And so for us, we will be dedicating, a portion of that roster to competing on the collegiate club side with our men's program. It's kind of helpful that we have them already, from a perspective of logistics and budget and things like that. But it's also a great development pipeline for us. Again, we've had some luck bringing in Finya, Julia, national champion this year. I mean, let's face it, I can't take credit for making them national champions. They came in as ready-made, talented, student athletes. But we've got some behind them that are developing, and then we're going to have another class of people developing, and who knows where hopefully that next national champion comes from. But they'll be able to do that by competing and participating in that collegiate club pipeline program. And I think it's great. I think it's awesome. It's really helping to grow the sport of triathlon. It's certainly helping to establish it as a viable college, activity program. And I think, a program like mine that's a hybrid with the men and women, the little intricacies of that are still being worked out, at least here at Wingate. But they like it. They like the enjoyment of watching the school compete against, University of Colorado Boulder and Clemson and stuff like that that the men get to do. Certainly, we're hoping to do that on the women's side as well, but it just brings a little bit higher profile to the sport and the program for us, which helps us as far as getting support from the university and certainly raising money from alumni, things like that.
And back in the early days of NCAA, when club athletes were still participating with the NCAA programs, it was fun to see a University of Utah or Montana or Michigan jersey out there on the start line. And
Sure.
it, at that point, was sort of a conversation starter about hopefully where this is all going.
Right.
Right? But in the interim, to have programs that have a foot in both, where the brand is present and successful in the fall, and present and successful also in the spring. That's fun, and I hope.
We're hoping so. I feel like we got that fall going. We're still working on that formula for the spring, and I think from the coaching perspective, talk about adding a little bit of variety, right? I mean, for the women's, we're really focused on that, draft legal, cross country style scoring. Even though we've changed some things up, but it's kind of one direction, one focus. When you talk about that club spring, suddenly, like you said, you've got non-draft Olympic distance. You've got the sprint draft legal. You've got the mixed relay if you're running both teams, and the scoring of it is weighted, and so team selection becomes really important. So from a coaching growth perspective, I mean, I've been learning a lot. How to select the best team for qualifying in the fall for the men, and how to stack them in the draft legal or the non-draft, and then gosh, you have to narrow it down to two guys for the draft legal. I mean, for our program, that's really tough. That's a challenge. But that's just opportunities to grow as a coach and to learn, and we're mixing it up a little bit. I think we kind of loaded up the draft legal race this past fall with the guys and made some waves sweeping the podium at the conference race. And it was kind of like, well, why'd you do that? Well, we did okay in the non-draft race, and my guys really want to do it. This is their opportunity to show me who those two guys are for the spring, and then we'll select them. So it's not always easy, cut and dry on the club side, as it is on the women's side and the NCAA. But I do find it challenging and kind of adding a little bit of spice to coaching.
Well, I think that's always one of the things that keeps coaches up at night, team selection.
Oh.
Whether you have to narrow it to 2 or 7 in the fall, there's always somebody who's just that one slot out who may or may not be an argument for them to be deserving of one of those spots, right? So that's always tough. No matter.
And I think we had a example this past fall that brought it into focus for me. One of my experiences as a freshman collegiate student athlete, getting ready for the regionals in cross country, I ended up to be that 8th guy, and so the coach, loaded us up in the van to go to regionals, and Nick, you're the alternate. Your job is to carry the bags. And I was like, oh, okay, and I watched some guys race that were a little hurt, maybe a little under the weather, and I was like, oh, I really maybe could have been in there, but I carried the bags. So, my lesson from that is when I take an alternate, it's about experience. So, I usually pick a freshman, things like that. This year, we ended up having some situations happen with the team with our top 7 that probably my number 10 girl going into 10 or 11 girl going into regionals. I took her and raced her in the club race there. She raced really strong, which kind of bumped her up, as we started to select for nationals. I ended up, okay, you're like, our number 9 girl, you're right there. I need you to stay ready. We had somebody go down walking across campus, have an injury. And so suddenly she's number 8. So now she's going to nationals. So now I'm like, okay, you really need to focus. And then as we got closer to nationals, the flu bug hit us, and suddenly another one went down. And now I'm like, okay, now you're in our top 7. So I hope you've been training and focusing, and she ended up to be our number 6 girl, racing. So, those kinds of situations, I think that's college sports, that happens. Perfect plans fall apart, but sometimes you have that person who's been sitting on the bench, and maybe a backup quarterback, to compare to football, and wow, they get thrust into the spotlight, and you hope that you've done your job as a coach, and they put in the work as a student athlete to have success, and that was, for me, that was a great story, and just reinforces that roster building, building that culture, having that number of student athletes, to be able to fill in and really, make sure that you have a good season, your whole team has a good experience. Those kind of stories, they just always kind of keep you going as a coach. They get you through those hard, long nights of recruiting and logistics and, driving to races.
The sport is still young enough that recruiting depth of talent and experience can be challenging. And you've had the very best. Your first 2 years at nationals, you had the overall podium, top of the podium in Finya Sherrill and also with Julia Kekkonen. So if you combine them with newbies, you combine them with developmental athletes, that can create a management challenge for a coach.
Yeah.
You're out on the open roads. We were maybe swimming in open water. Trail running not as dangerous, but it then becomes logistically more challenging with different paces. How do you manage that day to day when you have a broad spectrum of abilities all in a training session?
Well, I think part of that comes down to a bit of culture, right? Because it's easy for those high-end student athletes to just kind of dismiss, their teammates if they can't keep up on the bike ride or they can't keep up on the run, right? That creates some bad dynamics. So I think really, kind of investing in some conversations with those high-end athletes and say, listen, part of the reason you're here is for your experience, and to be able to share that. And, we've had some good luck with that. The other thing is, for me as a coach, kind of my philosophy is this is our general training plan for the week that kind of goes out to the team. And then I go back and I'm going to be altering that a little bit. And, there's going to be some exceptions to make sure the Finyas and the Julias get pushed, and fortunately for us, we have the men's team. So, there are some opportunities for us to use them to try to still push those ladies. And then there's other times where I want those ladies in the workout with everybody to make sure that we're bringing up, those new people so that they're learning how to ride in a group more effectively, see kind of how the strategies and the dynamics work. And then the other thing, when we're bringing in those newbies, okay, so, for example, next year, talking to a recruit, very strong swimmer, very interested in triathlon, she's done the age group swimming, she's a little bit burned out, looking to expand, do something different. Well, she's going to be able to contribute in the pool, and those athletes may be able to help Julia and push her, to improve her swim. So really focusing on highlighting those opportunities, kind of, I hate to say building value in them being on the team, but that's really what it is. Everybody has something to contribute. One of the student athletes that we have on the team now that had no triathlon background that came in, she was actually a retransfer, here at Wingate on the swim team, transferred to a big Power 5 school. It was too big, wanted to come back, but didn't want to swim anymore. So she called me up, and we had that conversation about, being new, coming into the program. I think you can really contribute on the team in the swim, but also being a little bit older, right? We were a new team, so they didn't always know how things on campus worked, where things on campus were. She had a lot to bring to the team, and the team, realized that, recognized that, and really invested in her, improving. And I think, great story is that she came in January, we had her training with the team, kind of learning the sport, building up her run and her bike. And then over the summer, when she went to do her very first race, one of the other girls on the team traveled down and did the race with her, so that she wouldn't be able to do it herself. She'd have somebody helping her out. And, that kind of thing is I think really what we're focusing on as we build this team with, again, a wide spectrum of student athletes. Is kind of showing that everybody's got something to contribute, and there's going to be those opportunities for them to step up maybe in year 3 or 4, as they start to learn the sport. Because let's face it, at their ages, as far as their maturity, physically, mentally, knowledge of the sport, I mean, definitely in 4 years, you can have somebody develop into a national champion. We were fortunate to get some ready-mades, but we've got, like I said, we've got some in the pipeline that I think could certainly be there in the future. It's just giving them the opportunities to learn and develop, and we'll see where it goes.
You and I both come from track and cross country prior to having the opportunity to coach collegiate tri. And there's a lot of different models of success. There's teams that have the low stick. And a lot of individual race planning goes into the scoring the rest of the team, whereas there's pack focused teams. How would you characterize your program? How do you all try to race?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point. Especially coming from cross country background. I mean, that's really what you look at. I think for us, definitely one of my focuses was to make that quick early impact. And that's what Finya and Julia allowed us to do. To get that jersey and that school up front and do that. I think as a team, though, if you looked at our success, at regionals this past year, nationals, has been our girls working together on the bike. So I think we could be better swimmers. As a coach, kind of being critical of our performance and our program. We should be swimming better, but when we come out of that water and our girls come together on the bike, the NCAA competition level isn't quite there where maybe you watch a world triathlon race and it's a fluid pack and there's things that it's a little bit disjointed still. It's a little bit broken up. But our girls tend to be really strong, riding together, working together on the bike. And so I think we've got a bit of that pack mentality. We just happen to have one or two out front that are out there competing maybe a little bit separately. But in general, we have 4 or 5 girls finish that bike together, and I think that's what's kind of built our team result over the first 2 years.
In terms of brand building, it's nice to have that jersey in the lead pack for sure.
Yeah.
And it's a nice cushion, right? To have that low stick. In this case, now that the new scoring has been implemented, to get that 75 points, that sets you up for success. Moving forward, as you develop your athletes, does your shift towards looking at your pack impact your approach to recruiting?
A little bit. A little bit. Like I said, I think in the first 2 years, you really, your focus is really getting on those numbers so that you have the viable team. Like I said, I was able to expend a little bit of time and let's face it, money, to be able to get some of those top end athletes. And I think now going forward, like I said, it's really filling that spectrum. Every year, maybe taking a shot at, hitting the home run and getting another Finya or Julia. Getting some of those athletes that are going to, fill in that pack, be able to contribute, either in the swim now that we have box starts, right? Having somebody that can really lead out, that's aggressive in the swim, making sure that, we train well as a group on the bike. I think that's something that we continue to focus on, is getting them out as a group, doing the interval workouts as a group, focus on training together as a group on the bike so that they continue to work together well during the races. And then, having that cross country and track background, I think, the run part comes easier for me as a coach. But also, that is probably that one metric that when I'm doing recruiting that I'm continuing to focus more on. What is that upside on the run? Where's their 5K times in just a flat 5K? I think in year one and for the most part in year two, there was a little bit less focus on distinct metrics. It was okay. I got to get bodies. What were their triathlon results? Now it's a little bit about kind of nailing down what we're looking for in a 5K, what we're looking for in a swim time, and it makes recruiting a little bit easier. But as you know, as all of the coaches know, that it's a limited pool still. So sometimes you're gonna try to figure out, okay, well they don't have that 5K time, but she's gonna be able to contribute in the swim in the pool and training maybe to start off with, and as long as having those recruiting conversations, they're willing to work hard and develop the other aspects of their triathlon performance, you know, that kind of moves them up, the list.
What's something that you do with athletes, whether they come in, as you call them, ready-made, and they're performing at a high level, but maybe they're still developmental at the world triathlon races,
Mhm.
versus the athlete who's still developmental in the collegiate space and trying to contribute to their collegiate team. But I'm curious what your approach is to help them identify what maybe their limiters are or where their opportunities are to get to the next level.
Yeah, I think that's when I talked about recruiting, athlete management, and then actually coaching. Um, that athlete management piece is really about building communication. A lot of meetings. It may be a meeting before swim practice starts. It may be a meeting, at the track as they're warming up or cooling down. Having those one-on-one conversations is really important because let's face it, some of these student athletes, their aspirations are going to be to go on, continue to compete. As like Finya has, and so maybe as far as her physical performance, there's not a lot of things to contribute, but maybe a little bit on the mental side, maybe a little bit on that race strategy side. There's still some opportunities for me to really contribute. I've enjoyed watching her race, and talked to her a few times over the past summer, and now she's considering even coming back as an assistant coach in the spring, to be able to train a little bit here at Wingate and be able to contribute to building up that next group of girls coming up. So I think if you find where you can help people, they become a little bit more engaged, and then they also want to give back a little bit. And so you may hear, and I started captains for the first time this year, and my captains will come to me and say, hey, this person's really struggling with this. It's not a tattling or a snitching kind of thing. It's like, we're trying to better the program. We're invested, you're invested, we want to help make this person better. So even the people that maybe don't have those conversations with me, or we try to identify that, and that's, I think, part of that culture thing. Sometimes not just preaching what worked best for me as an athlete. Certainly that's outdated in most cases. Maybe something I picked up from another team, saw during a race, maybe saw watching I like watching Bundesliga and WTS races. So maybe something I see there, and bringing it back, and hey, let's see if that can work for some of you, or try to make our team a little bit better. Because I mean, the races are getting closer and closer. I think that's one thing we've both seen over the last couple seasons, is that it seemed like in the beginning of NCAA triathlon, you saw these people way out front, big gaps, and small fields. Now we got bigger fields, we've got closer races, and those little things are making a difference. So you create a culture where people are feel comfortable bringing up maybe what they need help on, utilizing some people on the team to maybe help them, or point out where we can get better. And then as a coach, you kind of have to put the ego aside and say, I can learn more. I can learn from the athletes. I can learn from the other coaches. I have my strengths. Somebody else has their strengths. Let's figure out how to utilize them, and make it all work a little bit better.
I'd like to jump to your defense and say that you're not dated, but I have seen the bicycle that you ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on a recruiting call, and the father saw my bike in the background. I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? A museum piece? No,
Right.
no, I actually ride that bike. So yeah, and but it's kind of funny to see some of the things that even come back around at, at some point. I remember, it was everybody wore tri suits, then everybody was in speedos and singlets, and then tri suits came back, and it goes back and forth. It is always interesting. I pull out some of my old shoes and some of my old equipment sometimes, and I opened up a box in the garage and found something, and show them, and they just they can't stop laughing. But that's how triathlon has progressed, and certainly triathletes are known to be a little crazy and a little bit willing to try something from maybe that isn't so great, but we'll try it and see if it works. So we have fun doing that, and certainly it keeps the days a little bit more lively and keeps everybody a little bit lighter, and enjoying some of my old war stories.
Well, hey, I'm curious. You've been national runner-up as a team.
Yeah.
This year, you trophied. You took the third spot.
Yeah.
What's it going to take to get your program to the top step on the podium, kind of complete your team trophy Grand Slam in the next few years? What do you think you're going to need to add or develop at the Wingate program to get to that level?
Yeah, I think we need some maturity. We're a young team, and that's what I kind of remind myself at times and remind others, is that we do have some experienced athletes, but overall we're still only a year two team. We still have some maturing to go, and I think part of that is trying to isolate a little bit to stay healthy. That was kind of our downfall this year. Is, the flu took a huge toll on our program towards the end of the season. And as I look back at a few Instagram accounts and see the social, perfectly fine socialization, going to, a Charlotte Hornets game, things like that. It's just the exposure, how can we maybe minimize the exposure to getting sick towards the end of the season? As the national championship comes up, how can we maybe, prepare a little bit better health wise, nutrition wise? I think there's a level of maturity that we can improve on, that we can work on, and fortunately for us, I think the ladies kind of took that onto themselves after they certainly had high aspirations for nationals, and to fall a little bit short, they were disappointed in themselves and kind of rededicated to the spring, and coming back next fall ready to go, and then also I think for us, that the expectations rose very quickly. And as I walk around campus, I walk around the department, it's kind of like, it's still about race day. On paper, our team may be, maybe the top ranked or the top, experienced or whatever. It doesn't matter until you get to the race. It's triathlon. Anything can happen. Swim, bike, run. There are so many things that can impact that end result, that it's never set in stone. You can never really relax. You can never really cruise through it. And I think we need to kind of learn that lesson for the future. And I think as you step up, let's face it, the national championship, and you and I have talked about this many times. That should be the epitome. That should be the toughest competition. That should be the best of the best. And when you create that environment, that situation, it's never going to happen for sure. You need to really perform on that day, and we're just going to continue to work on that, and make that our goal.
That's great. Well, you've accomplished a lot in a very, very short time. You've created one of the marquee programs nationally in the NCAA movement, and I'm excited to see what you do on the club side as well. So thank you for taking the time to chat today, and good luck moving forward.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.